Okay, now that my model is complete, I'm ready to start assigning shaders. But one thing I like to do before I start actually assigning the shaders is organize my model. And to do that, I need to combine the objects by material. So I find, just the objects with all the same material and then combine them together into one single object. And this is going to make my shading process a lot easier. Sometimes it's easier to select, instead of selecting single objects like this, like every little piece of grill, I'm just going to select a whole chunk and then deselect the parts that I don't want by holding down Control and dragging to deselect those objects. And then I'll just combine what I've got left, and that can save me a little bit of time, like these bottom parts. Just deselecting and combine those. Combine these together, and that's generally how I organize. And once again, that's just going to make your shading process go a lot smoother. So go ahead and try that out before we move on to the next step. And now that my objects are organized, I'm just going to go ahead and drop some real basic shaders. I just want to get shaders assigned to my objects. I don't really need to fine-tune anything just yet because I don't have my lighting rig or my environment and ground plane. I need all my whole studio lighting setup created first before I really get into the fine-tuning. But just to start blocking out my shaders, if I open up my Hypershade graph, I'm not going to be using too many of the standard shaders. I still use the fongs and the blends sometimes, but for the most part on car shaders, generally I'll right click up here and create Maya nodes and go to mental ray nodes, and it's going to give me this whole new section of mental ray shaders. And underneath materials, I'm going to come down and I'm going to be using mostly the MIA material, and this is they call it the architectural shader sometimes. But the reason I use this primarily is because I can go straight to presets, and I've got chrome and glossy plastic, glossy finish, rubber, an interesting metal preset. Anyway, it just makes it really easy. I got my glass laid out for me, so let's try chrome first. I'm going to go replace, and it's going to replace all my settings. And for materials, that's definitely something you're going to want to name. It's pretty important for shaders. So name that chrome, and then just start dropping it onto your chrome objects. Usually use it for the back face of my headlights as well. And now let's try it on the front grille. And also for the main car paint shader, I'm going to use this car paint phenomenon, which is this one. By default, it's red. Let me assign that real quick. You can either right click and assign material selection, or sometimes what you can do too is middle mouse drag it over there and just drop it right in the object. It's kind of your choice. And I'm going to be going with black for my car. And whatever color you choose to do, make sure that your base color and your lid color, the lid color should be slightly lighter, and then I'm not sure why they have it kind of purplish as a preset, but I just usually keep it just slightly lighter so that my base color is black, my lit color is going to be slightly grayer and more silver. Let's try that out. And also something you want to keep in mind that I know just right off the bat, I don't want any flake in this shader. So I'm going to go ahead and take all these flake weights down to 0. If you really do need flake in your car shader, like you want a little bit of flecks of metal that kind of give it that scintillating look, just some things to keep in mind. The flake exponent, or actually decay rather, is what I mean. The flake decay, you're definitely going to want to have to tweak that flake decay, and it's always camera dependent. And the reason you want decay on there is so that it falls off as the flakes get further away from the camera. It's kind of a fall off. If you have 0 flake decay, that'll mean that the flakes on the front end of your car that are close to the camera will be the exact same size as the flakes on the tailgate that are further away from the camera, and then it just looks kind of strange. And so you're definitely going to want to put decay on there so that they fall off. So these settings take a lot of guess and check to get these just right, because they're so dependent on your scene and your camera. But for my purposes, I just generally put them to 0. also we can use this MIA material. Just get a quick preset for rubber. Sounds good. Don't forget to name it. Okay. And I'm going to do another chrome shader, but I want to make this one slightly different. Change the reflectivity, and this one's going to be my alloy shader, and I just want to change the name of it just for now, because I'm definitely going to not use my chrome shader on this rim, this particular part of it. But the whole point is basically just getting shaders assigned to the right objects. Do another one, and I'll do, let's say, glossy plastic, make it black. Assign it down here. And if you run into the problem where you can't really see what's going on anymore, or you just don't like the way this is looking, you can always go up to shading and use default material, and then just make everything gray. All your shaders will still be assigned, and so that's one way they can maybe help you out. But just keep in mind, even though, like for this object right here, I just assigned like a really glossy texture to it, and it's coming out like flat matte black in my viewport. That's perfectly okay. Just keep in mind the viewport is not an accurate representation, especially the mental ray shaders. They just don't accurately portray what's going on in your shader inside the viewport. It'll render just fine, but just remember that what you see in your viewport is not necessarily what you get. And then as far as glass, I'm just going to use the preset for the thin glass. The thick and the solid and the physical ones, they just kind of take longer to render. You might want to experiment with those depending on, just go with whatever looks good. The end result is the only thing that's really important. But generally I just start with thin, and then if I need to go with a more intense, more render intensive material, I will change it later on. But for now, we're just, once again, just kind of dropping these into place. I'm going to use my glass shader for turn signals as well. I also want to take a second to point out as well, if you're having trouble managing which textures, you can't remember which shaders you have assigned to what objects, you can always select an object like this, and then this blue icon up here in the middle of my hypershade, and click that, and it'll just drop it right down here into my work area. So I can always tell which object is my car paint shader. I forgot to name that. Or I can bring back my glass. So I can make it a little bit easier to manage for you also. If you're wondering why we would assign shaders and then not fine-tune them, and then create lights and the studio lighting first, and then go back and fine-tune them later, if you're wondering why I choose to work that way, it's easier at this point. We're getting the shaders to the places they need to be, and we're making really kind of just dumb, not fine-tuned, not render-intensive. I haven't jacked up the sampling rates or the reflections on any of these materials quite yet, so it should render relatively quickly. So it's kind of just like dummy shaders for test render purposes, and then we'll slowly, once we get everything in place, then we'll just slowly start cranking up the settings and really fine-tuning it and making it look better. So that's just kind of the way I choose to go. Perhaps it's kind of a force of habit for when you're shading like more complex environments with many more shaders in the scene, but this is just the way that I generally do my workflow, and that's the reason why. And then once you've got just all your materials blocked out, then we'll move on to the next section, and we're going to create our studio lighting setup, get a ground plane underneath there, and then once the lights are in place, and then we start doing our test renders, then we can really see what needs to be changed, and we can fine-tune all of these shaders to get better results and start testing them and see what's going on.